Hey, the portrait here. This video I'm going to provide some casual commentary regarding the process of doing this portrait. I'll put the reference I used on the screen. This is one of those pictures that I have the copyright to do that. And this is the end result of my drawing. As you can clearly see, I changed my drawing from the reference a lot in the area of proportion, just cause I felt like it. The total real time of this drawing is maybe an hour and a half, I'm not sure, I have to check the file. And I want to make something clear first. Pretty much every drawing I do, the process goes a little differently, sometimes a lot differently. I don't follow a strict formula or anything, but there is a large principle I generally follow, which is to work on the large value, structure, background first, and details, refining the drawings later on top of that. So I start with my self-made blending stump to make the proportion marks. I have a video in my channel that shows you how to make this yourself. Technique-wise, I used a fairly mechanical method of proportion construction. I have a comprehensive 3-hour tutorial on that method, and if you have been taking my courses on realism for beginners on Patreon, proportion is going to be the topic for the next class video, and we're going to be delving more into different aspects of that. So back to the drawing. Once I have an idea of the form of the portrait, I kinda debated with myself on whether I want a dark background or just leave it white. I eventually decided to use a dark background to contrast with the light and her fair skin. So I roughed in some background but left bottom right blank, since it's where my hand makes more frequent contact with the paper and I want to keep my hand as clean for as long as I can. The next step, I put down some overall light mid-tone, followed by mapping out the shadows and adding features. In retrospect, I really should do the dark shadow part first, since I risk losing the structure I defined earlier if I do the overall mid-tone first. But I got lucky and I was still able to see some of the earlier marks I put down, although just barely. So sequentially, I normally would do the shadow mapping first. And I just want to point out that even though I have this 2D reference, I am imagining this as a 3D object, a live person I'm looking at. If you look at the drawing, it's almost like I'm doing a 3D statue. It's all geared toward getting that idea of the 3D form across. Because if this part is completed decently, your intuitive part of the brain is engaged, and you can start to add details however you want. And one can imagine it is a lot easier to add features and notice problems and tweak them as you see fit when you already have a 3D mannequin that's already there, so to speak. Now, another note, I don't think like this for every drawing, but it is my thought process for this one for some reason. From here on, it's just me refining the shadows and transition tones and just overall tone values really. Sometimes I would blend with my finger, sometimes my blending stump. I would use a combination of charcoal and eraser to adjust the highlight and dark tones. Now for the hair, it is how I have pretty much always drawn hair, which is a dark foundation with charcoal, and then I kinda draw in the highlight with eraser. It's fast, it's relatively speaking easy, and it tends to look fairly realistic. The thing to watch out for is, as you put down the highlights, you want to make sure the form and the style of the hair is clear and makes sense. Ultimately, you want to make sure the structure is conveyed clearly. Not every highlight has to be in the exact correct place. Hair is one of those things that confuses a lot of new artists because they don't know how to deal with it, which tends to happen if you think of hair as this super complex thing that is made out of a lot of individual strands and lines. But if you simplify all that to just a type of 3D form, not that much different than how you would look at lips or ears or even a hat, then it is no longer that big of a deal. Adding some highlight lines, using sharp dark tones for some stray hairs, and it's not difficult to end up with something that looks very convincing. The real-time video of this drawing I will put on Patreon, feel free to follow along, and if you have any questions, just send me a message there. I hope this video has provided some helpful insight. If you are interested in learning how to draw more deeply, getting all the tutorials I make and will be making, and have access to a lot of real-time videos, and continued access to new videos, just check this link out. If nothing else, there is an FAQ section there that tells you what tools I use. Cause if I get another question asking what paper I'm using, after I answered it a million times and have made a video specifically about it, I'm just gonna politely answer your question anyway if I have the time. Alright guys, subscribe, notification, all that mumbo jumbo. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers!